Before you walk into any room, you are pre-introduced. You have something that follows you, not follows you, walks into the room before you, right?
Yep.
And it's your last name.
Yep.
It's the name Tisch. Do you think your last name has been more of a burden or a boost to your career?
I mean, it's insane to call it a burden, right? It's a mistake to sit here and say that you had this amazing opportunity in life that you just walked into, and that's now a negative every time you walk into a room. That said, you have to be aware that people are judging you, and that people have assumptions when you walk into a room that they're gonna look at you with, and until you can either move them away immediately, they're always gonna be sitting there waiting. And so it has to be a benefit. It opens doors. It gives me some semblance of credibility on one hand, but also a semblance of like negative judgment on another hand.
What's the negative judgment?
Here's a rich kid who was born on third base. It gets every opportunity just by walking into a room. And I think that's, it definitely in some situations happens to be the truth, but it doesn't mean that that door, you can walk in that door just because of that name.
3 years ago, you got the job to essentially run Techstars New York City.
5 years ago.
5 years ago, I'm sorry.
I think.
When you got that job, there was immediate criticism, immediate pushback. A guy named Matt Morellis, I know you know this, who is a founder, an entrepreneur of some sort, said, what is Techstars doing hiring a non-entrepreneur to run its program? Yep. Some anonymous entrepreneur who gave, I think, a quote to Beta Beat said, I have no idea what experience beyond his family history led him to this position. Was that an example right there of the negative prejudgment of you? Or David, you said sometimes it's true. I was born on third base. Or was it accurate?
Matt picked a weird time to do that. So it was about a week after our first demo day. So I had already executed on what I think was one of the better executions of an accelerator that had ever happened, other than Y Combinator. When I joined Techstars, we did a great job that first program. And so Matt came out a week after that and questioned it. So had Matt said that 3-4 months earlier, I think it was a stronger statement. I think the timing of that statement was a bit off because I had already done the work to show that I was capable of leading a good
Doesn't
program.
that suggest that perhaps, and this is why we're talking about this, they weren't questioning your experience. They were questioning your last name.
Sure.
How you got it. Was it a velvet rope sort of situation that got you into that job?
It wasn't.
But was that what they were questioning?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that they were questioning how I, given my background, was able to mentor a group of startups to try to succeed. They didn't see anything on my LinkedIn resume that said this person's going to be able to do a great job here.
It's always been weird to me that people use inherited wealth as somehow a discounting factor in your ability or what you're doing. It's, to me, the logical equivalent of holding someone's poverty against them. You really had no say in what you were given. Now, granted, it was a benefit, but it is something that happened to you, right? And so the better question is not whether or not you have the wealth or don't have the wealth, but what you do with the wealth.
I totally agree, right? So you have, it's my life. It's not my grandfather's life, it's not my father's life, it's not anyone else in my family's life. So I can walk in and say, okay, great, I have this, I'm done. Or you can say, I want to do things for myself. I want to build something that's my own. I want to have my own name that is separate from this last name. So who's David Tisch, not who's Tisch. And I think that that's been important for me from the start. And so I think everybody who has a good thing or a bad thing when they're born has to figure out what to do with it.
I find that fascinating. Before we talk about some of the things you chose to do, you essentially answered the question that many people play a game with at the bar, right? Like, if you won the lottery, if you had $50 million, what would you do with your life? And all of us who aren't in that situation wonder, would I be on a beach? Would I do these things? You clearly, I mean, do you feel like your life is an answer to that question? You didn't have to do anything. This is what you chose to do?
Oh, man. Sure. I think that there's, like, from my early childhood, there was no ability not to do something. There was no ability to just take it easy, right? Whether it was in school, whether it was in sports, whether it was in life, I was always pushed to be great and to try harder and to not take the easy path. And so probably from my early childhood upbringing, it just wasn't an option. So
just based on family culture, you're talking
about
how you were raised?
Yeah, just based on culture. I think that my parents, my grandparents, there was examples of success around me, And so it raised the pressure to be successful. It didn't open up an opportunity to be lazy. And I think there was nobody, when you looked around my family, that was coasting. And I think that as a kid, it put even more pressure to figure out what to do.
Here's something I think is fascinating about your family. We're continuing to talk about this right now, but look, the Tisch family, you guys own 50% of the New York Giants, started the Lowe's Corporation, built it into a multi-billion-dollar industry. I think the family's worth north of $20 billion. But it's not just you looking to blaze his own trail, not follow the family into the Lowe's Corporation. Your dad did the same. And as I read about your family, the truth is your grandfather and his brother, the ones that essentially built this massive wealth, they did the same thing themselves because your great-grandfather had a garment industry. And I would imagine it would have been very easy for them to just follow in the footsteps before buying that first hotel.
And a summer camp in the Catskills, and they could have went into the camping business or into the Catskills and that whole industry. That would have been a mistake, looking back, right, and where the Catskills have moved to. But I look at my grandfather as a true entrepreneur. He had a lower middle class family in Brooklyn, figured out how to borrow money to buy a hotel and built that from the ground up. It was a hotel in bankruptcy. It was a hotel that was struggling. And from that single hotel came this Fortune 100 business.